Welcome to Dear Art Producer, a podcast connecting the photography and video community with art producers. Drawing on her agency experience some years ago, photography agent Heather Elder penned an open letter to art producers discussing the finer points of working with one another. This podcast takes that idea and will introduce you to different art producers, share the stories of their diverse career paths, explore what it means to stay relevant, and examine industry topics such as marketing, estimating, directing, websites, and more.
Hi, welcome to Dear Art Producer. I am your host, Heather Elder, and today we welcome Mike Bilbrey, a senior consultant at Burnett. Mike has a great story, which I will let him tell, but let's just say it involves a history teacher, a mailroom, and a CEO who made a lasting impression. I've known Mike for as long as I can remember, and he's one of the kindest people I know. Burnett has been fortunate that he's been on their team for 28 years. He has seen it all. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm
glad to be here.
Absolutely. I'm so happy to have you. My gosh, in this amazing loft
Right.
with the trains literally right there going by.
Right.
We both commented and first thought on our own and then commented that this looks like it would be a location for a incredibly cool Chicago-based sitcom or drama series,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
We both saw the firefighter from Chicago Fire come in. It seemed like, he'd be right at home here.
Crashing after a long term of duty.
Exactly.
No, it is lovely. In this old historic building.
It's cool.
It used to be some kind of manufacturing.
It's awesome. I'm so excited to be here.
Good.
So let's start by telling the story.
So back in 1991, which seems like decades ago, but it was, I was getting ready to finish at Loyola, and I was going to be a history teacher, and had a nun friend who worked at an all-boys Catholic high school who offered me a job to teach history. So I'd signed a tentative contract, and a friend of mine who worked at Burnett called me and told me how cool it was to work at Burnett, what a creative environment it was. He said, "Wow, you're so creative. You should really come and apply for a job. I know there's an opening in the mailroom. It's probably not what you'd want to do, but all you need to do is get your foot in the door." Because back then Burnett was privately held, and it is an awesome place to work still. But back then, when you're privately owned, it was just an incredible place to be able to have an opportunity. So, on a whim, I met him for lunch, and I gave him my resume. And the next day, I got a phone call asking me to come in for an interview. And when I interviewed, I found out that they were offering more money than the teaching contract, believe it or not. It wasn't a lot more, but it was more. And back then I thought, I really want to maybe just do this for a year. I do have a bit of a creative side, and it is true. You sometimes just need to get your foot in the door.
Absolutely.
To see what happens.
Yeah.
So I told Sister Marianne, sorry, I'm going to take this other job. I'll probably come back to you in a year groveling and begging for a job. But something just told me I had to try it. And I interviewed with 6 people on like a Tuesday. And on Wednesday, they called and offered me the job. My friend was excited. Kevin was very excited that I got the job. So I started in November of 91. And shortly after that, I met the CEO at the time. His name was Cap Adams. And there was a little Christmas party in the mailroom or distribution center. And he introduced himself and he said, "You're new." And I was surprised that he knew I was new. He's the CEO of the company. And I said, "I am." And I told him, that I was graduated from Loyola and just got a job here the previous month. And he said something to me that I'll never forget. He said, "I started in the mailroom too." And something to the effect of, "I know you're going to go places." And I had just met the man, which was pretty impressive to me that he obviously saw something that I didn't know I was, showing.
And he came and sought you out.
And he came and sought me out, introduced himself. He was a very nice guy. Everybody loved Cap when he was CEO. And July of the next year, I took a job in the art buying department as a coordinator. A job had opened up. I'd gotten to know the art buyers really well, Wendy Sharprath and Jean Christensen, Tony DeBellis and Lynn Kyle.
Oh my gosh.
We really bonded. They were just such amazing people. And they were expanding the department at the time. So I started when Patty Kalaki and Char Eisner came on board as art buyers.
Amazing.
A lot of names from
I
the,
love
from
it,
the past.
and it's just making me smile. You can't see, but I'm smiling.
It's so funny. I'm the only one left, sort in quotes. From all those great folks, and of course Tony passed away, which was sad. But yeah, I went in the art buying department and became a coordinator. And a couple of years later, they gave me my first account, Jen Eyre. And then in 96, I was promoted to full-fledged art buyer and took over the Oldsmobile account, which was a ginormous account at the time. And then they gave me other accounts. I still kept Jen Eyre. I picked up Maytag and other little things. I don't really remember what they were now, and then, that's what started the career. And then I just kept working, and until 99, Oldsmobile was my big account, and then I took over the Marlboro Cowboy in 99 and worked on that. I've worked on a part of Philip Morris my entire career at Leo Burnett. Even as a coordinator, I was doing some stock buying and little things for Philip Morris because it was such a huge account. But then, I took over the Marlboro Cowboy with Marlena Marino in 99. We co-produced because there were so many productions to be done. And then I think I've worked on every major account in the agency from that on.
Oh my gosh.
So
you've had your finger on the history of Leo Burnett for so long.
Well,
You're part of their history.
I've been there for a little while. I mean, 28 years sounds like a lot, but there are a lot of people there that are there 30 plus, and a couple who are there 40 plus.
Wow. So
it's still a really great place to work. It's changed a lot, but it's still Leo Burnett. I'm still a Burnetter.
Yeah.
Well,
you've seen so many changes in our industry.
We've seen a lot of changes in the industry. Leo Burnett going public, being owned by Publicis now, and many of the agencies, Omnicom and others own a ton of agencies.
Did you feel a big change when that happened? Did the culture of the agency change, or did it come at a time where people felt like the influx of a Holden, another owner coming in was helpful because now the pockets were deeper, the resources were deeper, or whatever it was that they brought to the table? Yeah,
that was probably the biggest plus, is that our arm could extend a lot further. Being taken over by a holding company. I mean, the con is you're no longer an independent agency, and so not so much the culture changing, but the feeling that you're no longer independent and just on your own 2 feet, and your successes are all your own. Now they're sort of belong to somebody else. I don't know if that's the right way to explain it, but once you're a Burnetter, you're always a Burnetter. So that innate culture in your loyalty and your work ethic never changes. It just we just got bigger and stronger and more global than we were. I think when Publicis took us over, we were 80 some offices in 90 countries, or 90 some offices in 80 different countries. So Burnett had already spanned the globe. But with a public takeover, you're right. It gives you an influx of cash and identity and
reach
to new clients, and you have a lot more resources because you can depend on your partner agencies and affiliates to help out when needed. And so it was a big change, but there were pros and cons, I think, on both sides, really.
Let's go back to you for a second. What is something surprising about you that people might not know?
That I studied to be a priest for 9 years. I don't think many people know that. I was in seminary all through high school and college, and decided at college to pursue other things. So a lot of people don't know that I did that. I totally disappointed my mother. She had 5 sons, and I think she thought she was going to get a priest out of one of those. She was going to get one of them? I think I secretly broke her heart a little bit. She was happy that I made a decision that I was happy with. But, a lot of people don't know that. So the things you were learning when you were studying to be a priest, did any of those translate over into advertising? Were you able to draw from any of that? Yeah, I think patience. For sure. For one, you have to have patience in this industry, or you'll just be ripping your hair out every day. You have to keep it in perspective. I'm not curing cancer. I'm not, feeding the world. It's advertising, and it's a noble profession in its own, but you have to keep it in perspective. And it's a busy life. It's a very complicated life, and you're answering to so many people as an art buyer. You're sort of the center of a wheel.
Mm-hmm.
You're a little lawyer. You're a little account person. You're a little creative person. You're
Mm-hmm.
a little finance person. You're a little producer. You're a little policeman, you know?
Yeah.
So
Therapist.
you really, you know, studying for the priesthood kind of centers you because you know that you're going to be you're going to be reaching out to so many people on so many different levels. And that's exactly what I did as an art buyer. You know, I had to work with so many different parts of the agency and clients and different levels of clients and creative people and photographers and digitechs and, you know, models and talent agents. And so I equate it to a little bit being a priest. You know, you're going to reach out to families. You're going to reach out to single people. You're going to reach out to people who are falling away. You're going to reach out to people who are depressed or sad. Right. And so I think it did kind of help me prepare to be an art buyer producer.
One theme that comes up a lot in terms of the skills or the traits that make a great art producer is this idea of patience and also just bringing a sense of calm to a production, even though inside you might be screaming and panicking, but being the one that just makes everybody feel okay and that things are under control. Right,
because in this position, you really have to be the one who solves the problem, whatever the problem is. You really are the center of the production. And anything goes wrong, all the heads turn and look at you.
Always.
Nobody comes to you and says, "Oh, this happened, but we took care of it."
Yeah.
You know, they all look at you and say, "How do we take care of this?" And, you know, there are really great production companies who can solve problems just as easily as an agency producer can. But because you're the one really in the center of it all, most people turn to you and ask you to solve the problem. Yeah. So one nice compliment, a boss of mine who I had a very long time would always call me unflappable. And I always thought that was a really nice compliment because I never really did panic. I never really did, you know, freak out. Every problem was solvable. And if it wasn't solvable monetarily, it was solvable, you know, through negotiation or, you know, getting the client to understand that perhaps what they're asking for is out of the scope. And, you know, you can have whatever you want, but these are the, you know, ramifications of your ask. And I just always felt that no problem in the industry was insurmountable. I mean, you could always find a way to make it work.
I agree. Like as a rep, a lot of times problems, you and I are the ones discussing the problems and trying to figure it out and come up with a solution. And I think, you know, so many times it just means like, let's just take a second, let's break it down. Let's put it into the language that everybody on the team can understand and figure out what our options are. Because really you have no other options but to figure it out. Like it's not like you can walk away or you can cancel. Like it's not going to go away. So we just kind of have to be really transparent, honest, and figure out what's realistic and what's possible.
Like I always say, you can have a lot of people over for a dinner party, and if all your food burns, there's always takeout. There's always some way to salvage whatever you're doing. And in advertising, I just think it's the same way. I think I think what's really important in this job is to be a really good negotiator and make people understand that the changes they're asking for weren't part of the original scope, or what they're asking for is beyond what was discussed and budgeted for. A lot of people don't understand that. You always get the side eye, hey, do you think we could slip this in? Or, hey, do you think we could make this small change? Well, you know, changing something on set is never small. I mean, it's a lighting change. It's, you know, it could be a set change or a prop change. You know, it's not just a simple thing. So just understanding that, or letting someone or helping someone understand that avoids the chaos and the panic that ensues when, you know, something's asked for or scope changes or something needs to be negotiated that wasn't maybe part of the original, you know, project.
Well, and let's talk about the scope for a little bit, because Leo Burnett is amazing, incredible, top of their game in terms of defining the scope.
I think so, yeah.
I mean, I think you guys like wrote the book on it, because from where I sit, there are agencies that absolutely have very detailed spec sheets. And there are agencies where I get a quick email. Can you bid this for 2 days with 2 talent? You know, that's all the information I have for you, and I need the bid by tonight. And you're just like, oh my gosh. And that's dangerous.
Very dangerous for everyone
for
involved.
Everybody involved. So when I get a Leo Burnett
bid sheet.
bid sheet, I know there's going to be a lot of work between now and when the actual bid is done,
Right.
because you and I and the team are putting in the work ahead of time,
Right.
so that every single thing is in place. And I know that when I send you my bid, you're going to send it back to me 3 times with changes. You're going to mark it up, and you're going to say you're going to want it to read a certain way, and we're going to have it all match and
Right.
everything be perfect. And I appreciate that so much, because you and your clients value, or maybe Leo Burnett values, and therefore taught their clients to value
Right.
the importance of the scope
Right.
ahead of time, and the bid sheet.
And we are very deep. I think we have the best spec package that goes out of any agency, or it certainly stands up to any other spec package, because it's very detailed. Usage is very spelled out. Scope of the project descriptions are very spelled out. Delivery, is all numerated.
And nobody's trying on set to add in a shot, or let's do it this way, or a variation.
Usually not.
But no one's trying to get away with it. Everybody, there might be changes on set, and there might be things happening, but
Right.
everybody in the process is aware this
Right.
was not in scope. If we do this,
Right.
we're out of scope.
Right. Then it's time to call the rep, time to talk to the producer. We would like to do this. If you can accommodate, please let us know what that will be. Because for quite a while now, we've been working on firm bids. So,
which was the next thing I was going to ask you. And I think it's why everybody pays so close attention every step of the way.
And it has to be paid. Attention has to be paid, because any forgetfulness or any oversight, it could cost both of you. So,
right.
My job as a production consultant is really to help producers who aren't in traditional art buying backgrounds, and help them with photography and illustration. But it's also to sort of be an in-house cost consultant to an extent, because I go through the bids. I know what industry standards are. I know what markets are paying. I'm always keeping up on trends and so forth. So going through a bid, I'm not only protecting my client, I'm also in a way protecting the photographer, because I'm letting them know that perhaps they're moving well outside an industry standard for something. Mm-hmm. And, we as an agency don't like to set precedent, so you got to dial it back and, sort of meet what the industry is supporting at the moment. But I like that part of my job, because I've done so many productions, and I started to really do lots of on location, big budget productions, which really kind of tooled my skills as a negotiator and knowing what's necessary to get a job done without impacting the quality of the job or the creative. So, but working on firm bids is really good for everyone, because.
Can you explain the firm bid process?
Sure. It's just simply whatever you bid is firm, and there are no, oops, I forgot to, include catering for an extra day, or oops, I didn't put enough in for wardrobe, or we expect the bid when it comes and it's negotiated, and when it's settled as the final bid, that's what your PO is going to be for, and that's what you're going to invoice for. Mm-hmm. Now, if it's a change of scope, that would be an overage. Yeah. So that would be addressed separately. But gone are the days where, we sort of, put in $450 for catering, and it turned out to be $650. Right. So we need to bill you for, the extra $400. Well, sorry, you can't. That's, what a firm bid is all about. Now, the upside to the photographer, the producer, is you don't have to turn over any receipts. You don't have to turn over any backup. You just submit an invoice and get paid. So,
and that shortens the process.
It shortens the process a great deal, and it eliminates the phone book size invoices with 200 pages of taped receipts that we used to go through. I remember my big location jobs. I'd spend 3 or 4 days going through one invoice, because it would literally come in a 3-inch binder, and every receipt had to be audited and checked off, and I have to remember, being on set, oh, is this really our receipt? Or it just takes all of that paperwork away. Now, there are some times where you'll have a line item that might have to be cost actualized. Location expenses, for example, aren't always negotiated and settled before the shoot. Sometimes you're still in negotiations with a location. So that would be a line item that would be cost actualized, but you're going to turn over a property release anyway, and that's the backup. So it's really just a very simple system, and one I'm very glad we went to.
Honestly, we're thrilled that you went to it. And I often suggest it to certain clients, especially when we're doing kind of a project rate and it's something very special that we're doing at a much lower rate and doing a little bit of a favor.
Right.
I'll come back to them and say, okay, if we do this, this needs to be a firm bid, and we need to only send, I will write the scope and be very clear on what this includes. Yeah. And then I will say, we then need to just give you one line item, one or two line item invoice and send it along. And some people are open to it. Others are not so open to it. But
I know there are some agencies that don't use the firm bid system, and that's fine for them. I think it's greatly, enhanced our ability to pay invoices quicker and resolve issues, before the bid is final and the job is awarded. Because, a lot of times back in the day, things would be left a little gray, and now they can't be.
Right.
And I just think it protects everybody involved.
Oh my gosh, it absolutely does. It is 100% our preference.
Yeah.
And it also saves time. We don't have to bill you for the extra day of the PA to work on the invoice. Right. You don't have to spend your time for a client doing the reconciliation.
Exactly.
So I think
I love it. I think it's great. We did it mostly because all motion jobs are firm bid. And I don't know a time when they ever weren't firm bid.
Right.
So part of our rationale was bringing our billing system in line with motion and just making it a very simple firm bid across the board.
Right.
Like I said, there are exceptions to that rule. However, it's worked out really well.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, I'm hoping that people listen to this will see the value.
There is value for sure.
Consider it for their own agencies.
And it makes art producers and art buyers far more productive when they don't have to be spending their time auditing these crazy phone book invoices. Now, not every job is like that, but even a 2-day food shoot in a studio can be a rather large bill with crew fees and rentals and studio rental and props and wardrobe and props and food, and it can really start to add up. Yeah. So it just becomes a cumbersome activity, and I think our time is best used.
Absolutely.
And elsewhere.
I was going to say, and also up front, because it makes you and I have real conversations about each line item. And for me and my producer and the photographer having real conversations, because we need to make sure we're covered.
Right.
And I think by the time the bid gets to you, it is 100% right where it needs to be.
It's so easy, at least for me, maybe just because of longevity, but it's so easy to spot a thoughtful bid, and it's so easy to spot a bid that's maybe not quite so thoughtful, and immediately the red flags go up just by looking at what's bid, how it's bid, what the numbers are. Padding is so easy to spot. I'm always humored by the creative ways people try to pad their bids because it's really kind of hard to not spot the pad in a bid. And the whole purpose of a firm bid is, everything is properly bid and there's no need for pad. Everything is covered, and except for the miscellaneous line. Yeah, of course, there's always a few $100 that are out there that, but I just, I find it funny how some bids come in.
And for people who are listening who aren't familiar with the firm bid as much, the other side is if we have a firm bid for $35,000 for a shoot and I come in at $32,000, I still get to bill $35,000. So if I'm not going to create the bid so that it happens that way, because you and I are going to have a lot of back and forth. But if for whatever reason we're efficient, we're not penalized.
No, you're not at all, and that's part of what my job as a production consultant is to make sure that, and I don't mean this as an adversary, but is to make sure there isn't $8,000 of free money, or not free money.
There rarely isn't a bid
or money floating around that the one thing area that happens, and that's why we sort of cost actualize it, is location fees, because you're shooting in LA or San Francisco or New York, Miami, even Chicago. You could put in a guess, hey, $3,500 for a loft. Right. But you might find a loft that everybody fell in love with and the owner wants $8,000 a day. Right. So obviously that's going to.
So what do you do in that situation? Do I bid it at $3,500 or do I bid it at?
Well, that's why in some cases, if it's not locked before the award, we would cost actualize that.
Which means?
Which means you bill the actual.
You bill whatever it is.
Right now, of course, a $3,500 guesstimate. If it comes in at $8,000, that's going to raise a few eyebrows because somebody should be contacting the location and saying, "Give me a range. You know, are you 35 to 5? Are you 5 to 8? Are you 8 to 10?"
Right.
And then that's how it should be bid. But talent travel, location fees, and location expenses. Sometimes those are usually the 4 categories that I find we occasionally cost actualize that line item because. Sometimes a job needs to be awarded and started and things are not fully worked out based on perhaps client timeline or client approvals or many other issues. So those are the 4 line items that I find I occasionally say, why don't you cost actualize it and have them build a actual on these categories. And we set up our bids a certain way to cover those line items, and it always seems to work out. And very rarely do we do that, honestly. The thing we do it most on is location fees.
Yeah, and I can see that.
Yeah.
I can see that. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the marketing side of reaching someone like you and getting your attention or the people that you work with in your department. We used to have a lot of we didn't used to have a lot of different tools. We have more tools now to reach you. It used to be we only had, mailers, email blasts, source books. Talk to me a little bit about how people are staying in touch with you and getting to know you.
Well, because I'm a consultant now, I don't really actively produce anymore. So, but to your point about reaching out to art producers and art buyers, personally, I love email blasts. I don't like 10 a month, but if you update your webpage, that's when you should send an email blast, because if I'm constantly looking at the same thing on your website, it does cause one to sort of back off and lose a bit of interest. But if you tie your email blast to an update, then there's something new and exciting to see, and you want to go and see it. I love going to things like APA and AdEdge, thank you. Geez, I drew a total blank. AdEdge and portfolio reviews, because I always meet people I've never met before. And I always see amazing work that I've never seen before. And I love to get those people into my file. I keep a whole online, like Excel matrix of all my contacts. And I divide them by genres, food and location and
it's
product.
Your modern file cabinet.
Yeah, it's my because we basically don't have file cabinets anymore. Before, when we get mailers and promo pieces and things, I had a huge file cabinet filled with just all this great reference material. And now we're an open floor plan, and nobody technically has an assigned seat. So you don't technically have anywhere to put that stuff anymore. So it took me an enormous amount of time to convert my file cabinet into an e-file cabinet. But I bookmark websites all the time under whatever category it is. I always keep it at my fingertips because I'm constantly asked for recommendations, lists of who could shoot lifestyle in the U.S. or doing the European lifestyle shooters, or who's the best food shooters in the States or in Chicago, because food basically stays local. But I have a really extensive e-file cabinet now, which I'm very happy to have because and I update.
Pay a lot of money to see that.
Yeah, sorry, it's proprietary. But no, email blasts, really, I like them. I spend maybe the first half hour, 40 minutes a day going through the emails I've gotten.
You're always so amazing when I send you something and you like it and engage. You always send a nice note back.
Yeah,
I've always been very appreciative.
Yeah, if I see stuff that I really like, I'll always comment on it to sort of make a connection.
Yeah.
And I love getting notes back, because usually when you open the door, people will come back and tell you something else about themselves.
Right.
And I love looking at personal work on websites because I think it really talks about the person more deeply than the commercial work does. So I love to see what people are doing personally, because I think it really says something about like the artists they are, the creativity they have inside. So really like that a lot. I don't, obviously, I hate to say this out loud, but direct mail pieces are kind of a thing of the past, especially when you have an agency where you really don't have anywhere to get your mail.
Right.
We used to get really nice, expensive, promos, and I used to feel a little badly because you knew it was expensive, but as we were transitioning, I really didn't have anywhere to keep it anymore.
Right.
So I believe it or not, I brought a lot of it home, boxed it up because I just liked them so much. So I probably have 3 or 4 Bankers boxes in storage full.
Oh my gosh, there's a history lesson in
the
there.
Best promos I've ever gotten.
That would be so cool.
I would save the very best ones.
There's a museum.
I still have them back from probably the middle 90s, like the really cool best ones.
Wow.
Just because I love the creative end of it all.
Yeah.
Another way is just a phone call sometimes. I know that's weird to say because a lot of us are just so busy and connecting on the phone isn't always the way, but I think, I answer my phone.
Right.
And if I have time to talk to you, I'll be happy to talk to you. If I don't, I always tell you to follow up with an email and a website, and I promise I'll look at it and get back to you with some kind of, feedback or whatever. That's the other thing I really like to do. I like to give some feedback because I kind of dabble in the side of doing some photography consulting and helping people with their websites and set up their, portfolios, although portfolios aren't used a lot anymore. It's more iPads now, which is cool.
Do you like that? Do you like the iPads?
I hated it when it first came out. I thought it was the most ridiculous invention ever because what do you need an iPad for? You have an iPhone and a computer.
Right.
What are you going to do with an iPad? Well, when someone converted it to a portfolio, I thought that was genius.
Okay.
And I love them. I think they're an awesome way to scroll through a lot of work in a shorter amount of time. When I look at a book, for some reason, I always revert back and slow down and turn every page like I'm going to break it. And makes me very nervous because I know how expensive these books are. But I love iPads for that purpose. I still
and they're easy to update. It's very hard for these guys. We still have our traditional books.
Yeah.
And
you should have them. But,
and they're beautiful. And people love them when they're like, oh, book, right? Because they don't get to see them very often.
What's this?
But I do think the iPad provides an amazing opportunity to go deeper in a category or a project and also show video.
And they're a lot cheaper than having a bound book.
And they're a lot cheaper than having a bound book.
I for that purpose, I think they're a genius invention. I still never quite got what an iPad did over a computer or a phone. So, but for portfolios, I think it was a marvelous thing.
Yeah.
And I love looking at them. I love being, you put so much work on there. And like your website, every time you update your website, you can update your iPad. And it can be fresh new work. And I really like it.
And do you think creatives like the iPad, or do they think, I sit at my desk and I'm looking at a screen, and now I'm coming to this portfolio show and I'm looking at a nut? Like, I could look at this online.
No, I think they actually appreciate it because they don't have a lot of time anymore.
Okay.
So many creatives are stretched to, their time and, to their limits sometimes, and they don't have time to sit down and look at a book. We all know that looking at a portfolio takes a lot longer than scrolling through an iPad. Yeah. And I can scroll through an iPad in 10 minutes and get a fantastic overview of what you do and how good you do it. I can do the same thing in a book. It's just I don't have 40 minutes to do that. Right. So I think creatives do appreciate it. I think, in my opinion, creatives tend to like websites more because they can really, they can take 30 minutes at their desk and look at 15 people. Yeah. So that you can't do with an iPad. I don't think you could look at 15 iPads in 30 minutes, but you can flash in and out of a website pretty easily. And I think a key today is maintaining your website, making it very functional, and separating what you shoot. So if somebody's going to go to your site and you say you shoot food and location, if somebody wants to look at food, they shouldn't have to scroll through 100 images of mixed images to look at what they want to. So it should always be categorized. And you'll get a lot more hits that way, I think. If you have what the person's looking for clearly marked, they can go in and review. I think that's really important. And updating, most important. Again, you don't want to be looking at the same work, 6 months, 8 months, a year later, and nothing ever changes.
And nothing ever changes.
Shoot samples, change your work up. take an old image and retouch it and give it a new life somehow. There's always things that can be done to update your work.
Yeah. It's been a little bit of a challenge for photographers because they, a lot of times now, aren't allowed to show the work that they shoot for clients.
Yeah, we have that a lot.
So it's hard for them. So the ones that are busy, are fortunate enough to be busy, they're creating work that they are not allowed to show, but do not have the time to shoot for themselves.
Right. And that can be a problem because if you're really busy, you're not going to have that time.
No.
Which is unfortunate. Personally, I think once images have hit the marketplace, clients should be a little more open to letting photographers show the work for portfolio's sake, not
I agree.
Resell it as stock or, they should, I agree.
Or even the unbranded stuff.
Yeah, or
right?
unbranded.
Like
right.
unbranded.
Unbrand it and be allowed to show it. And there are some clients who are acceptable to that and will let you show some things once it's in market. There are other clients who just simply say no.
Yeah.
And I do think that's a little unfair. It's their decision, of course, but I do think some photographers are at a disadvantage if they shoot for clients who don't like to grant permission to do that.
Especially the flip side is then the client wants to see that your photographer can do the work.
Exactly.
And we don't have the ability to show that stuff because we've agreed.
I'll make a suggestion that I've made to other photographers is if you know you have a client who's very adamant about not granting permission or likely won't grant permission, while you have the props, build a whole new little set before you return the props, before you send things back, shoot a quick sample. Right. I mean, at the end of a shoot, take half a day and use the stuff you have to build a shot and do one. When I'm saying you need to update your site, I don't mean you need to add half a dozen shots every 3 months because that's a time-consuming proposition. Unless you're not busy, then perhaps you could do it. But I always tell folks, shoot a little sample when it's all done. It has nothing to do with your client's work. It doesn't look like the layout. It doesn't copy the layout.
Take advantage of all the production.
It's a complete 180, but utilize it to make a sample on your own time. You know, you're not using client time. You're not using, you're not interrupting the shoot.
That's a great idea. I'll suggest that every once in a while.
I think that's a way to try to do it when you're constantly busy but can't show the work.
Let's talk a little bit about getting a job approved, right? We touched on the firm bid earlier, and I know that the majority of the work is done up front because of that firm bid situation. But what happens in the approval process for you? Well, actually, let's back up a little bit more too. Let's talk about the creative call, the treatment, and then getting the job approved.
Okay.
So are you, as a production consultant, are you seeing the treatments that are created?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, every time I get, because I'm copied on all the bids. So if there's a treatment involved, I get them. Some are absolutely outstanding. Some you can tell took very little time to put together. And it's interesting because I think treatments are important, and I don't think they have to be, dictionaries. They don't have to be 80 pages long. But the effort will show in a treatment, even a simple treatment, if it's, sort of succinct and well put together. That's fine. Like I said, I don't think a treatment has to be this long, ongoing, dissertation about what you're going to do. But usually what happens, at least at Burnett, we try to have creative calls with the folks we want to bid. And then when it's narrowed down to the triple bid, because we triple bid most things, we send our spec sheets, our very famous detailed spec sheets. And then we usually ask, if it's a location shoot or has talent or it's a bigger shoot, we almost always ask for a treatment. Don't ask for a treatment usually on product and food shoots unless it's a really big undertaking. Sure. And the client would like to see approach.
Like a menu redo.
Yeah, menu redo, or if you're gonna shoot, all the client's packaging and all the product, something huge, 4 or 5 day shoot. And it's nice to kind of see a treatment put together. And I'm really impressed. I rarely do I see a treatment that's sort of an ignored process. What
makes a good treatment for you?
I think just nailing exactly what the creatives are looking for, what the deliverables are, show samples of your past work that speaks to what's being shot, and just how you're going to light it. Your enthusiasm for the project is always nice, and a line or two about it. But like I said, I don't think it has to be a huge thing. It just has to be, this is what you're asking me. This is how I can provide it. This is what it will look like. This is my lighting. This is my approach. And here's some samples of, what I've done in the past. And I think that's really all you need. Some are very long. Some are just soliloquies about photography, and just go on and on. I'm thinking, am I ever going to get to the end of this thing? And then you read the ones that are like that and have, at the end, you're so puzzled that, were we on the same phone call? Because this is completely different than what we were talking about, it doesn't happen often again, but it's very interesting to see the translation sometimes.
I do think it's really important for photographers listening who are trying to figure out how to make a strong treatment to really repeat back what the project is.
Yeah,
and
idea.
not get caught up only, which it's important too, but not to only get caught up in your vision and your approach, but really talk specifics about this project and the things that you're going to do that another photographer can't do. Right? They're not going to think of, not like, what differentiates you from the other two people on the table. And, don't just take the template from your last one and insert relevant pictures and send it along. But take some time to really think about what those deliverables are and talk about how you're going to execute that too.
Right. And to your point, I think of it, you're hiring a creative person, like a photographer, to bring their vision to make whatever you're shooting come to life. But I think when you do include things you've heard in the meeting that the client expects and wants, the direction the creatives want to go in, what their thoughts about lighting were, what their thoughts about composition were, and you feed that back, it just shows that you really understand the scope of the job, what the final deliverables will be. And I think you should, briefly touch on what your vision is for this and how you're going to kind of bring your twist to it, especially if we're hiring you for a look. A lot of photographers have looks that people go after, and they want it to look like the photographer's work. But you're still capturing the client deliverable, how the creatives want to show the work and what was sold to the client. So it all has to be sort of cohesive that way. But again, I just don't think it has to be an 80-page
I agree.
essay on photography and lighting, and that's just not necessary. One, nobody has time to read that anymore. Time to read that. And two, if you're going to go that far, it's almost like watching a movie when you're tired. You're going to watch the first 10 minutes and then you're going to fall asleep. And then when you wake up, you're going to close the book and move on. So that might sound harsh. I don't mean it to.
No, but I don't. I disagree with you.
I think it has to be succinct and to the point, as a famous line from The Music Man. I think that's a real good way to approach it. And then, after we bid the job, we get 3 bids. The sad part, the reality in our job is that one person can do the job. So no matter how great the bids are, you could have 3 perfectly competitive bids, apple to apples, love everybody. At some point, 2 people are not going to shoot this job. And that's really the hardest part of what we do. I always tell new producers, new art buyers, if someone's not going to get a job, call them immediately. Thank them for their effort.
Thank you.
And tell them they're not going to get the job. I know it's a difficult thing to do. Nobody likes to deliver bad news. However, it's the professional thing to do. And it speaks a lot, I think, for our agency when you've reached out to someone, they've invested time. We put them through the ringer sometimes on their bids, 4, 5 revisions, whatever. Yes, okay, that's the cost of doing business. I get that. But I think the cost of our doing business is keeping that line of communication open and letting photographers and reps and production companies know that we really do appreciate all they've gone through. And it's a tough call to make, but it's a call that has to be made because I think it just makes for good relationships. And, when I call you on the next job, you're not going to have a sour taste in your mouth that, hey, I did all this work and you never even bothered to tell me I didn't get the job.
Exactly.
And,
or you just shot me a quick email that had no real information.
Oh, sorry, we picked somebody else. Thanks.
Right.
Oh, that infuriates me.
It infuriates me as well.
I mean, do you have to write a 7-paragraph email? No. But hey, we didn't select you this time.
Mm-hmm.
It had nothing to do with creative. It had nothing to do with cost. We had to pick one person to do the job. You were all excellent bidders.
Yes.
Everybody came in within $5,000 of each other. Your treatment was fine. It just this time, we just decided to go in a different creative direction.
That is worth so much because, as you know, everybody puts so much time into this process, and to either not hear or to hear like quickly, oh, sorry, you didn't get the job. It's hard for me to take that back to my photographer because then they're like, wait, what? Why didn't we get the job? And maybe there's not a why. Sometimes it's just who the client chose, or the direction, the energy in the room went this way, or whatever it is.
And I'm all, at least when, and I know a lot of art producers and art buyers do this, and it's a good practice. But when I was an art buyer, art producer, if you were a high bid, once the bids were in, I would tell you, look, you're 40% higher than the other 2 bids.
Yeah.
So right now you have a decision to make. This is where I'm at, and this is where I need to be. And can you work your numbers down?
Yeah.
Now, sometimes that takes 3 rounds of going back and forth and trying to find creative ways on both sides how you can bring your number down. Take some negotiation and fees, perhaps, but I think in the bidding process, it's we're not always at liberty to tell you who you're bidding against. We're not always at liberty to tell you if we have a budget, because a lot of times we don't. The client says, I love the creative. I love the idea. How much is it going to cost? Right. Well, we have to bid it and let you know. I can do a ballpark till I'm blue in the face, but until you put a photographer to it, it's very difficult to do a ballpark that's going to be completely accurate, because I have no idea what caliber of photographer you're going to use. And I don't mean bad photographer or good photographer. No. I mean, photographers are a different fee level, so you have to figure out who you want to shoot it. So,
and when the job is over, are you open to sharing who was bidding?
I was always open to sharing that the minute the job was awarded to someone. So in my emails, generally I'd say, thank you very much for bidding the job, but, we decided to award it to photographer X. Right. And for these reasons. And at that point, I don't mind telling. The reason I never like telling up front, because I think a lot of times when I did that very early in my career, people would lowball bids because they knew who they were bidding against. Oh, I'm so glad people don't tell. I was always running into trouble with overages. Right. Because they would assume what the other person's bid would be. So I'd get a bid and think, wow, this is really low. Are you certain you're happy with this? Because I see some flags here. No, we're good. Right. Okay, well. I think there's a potential for that information to get in the other photographer's head. Well, yeah, and then you get the job. And I remember one very specific, one of my first Oldsmobile jobs, bid a very high caliber photographer, triple bid it. They were all Apple, all the same caliber. And a rep sent the bid back, and I thought, wow, this is really low compared to the other 2. So being new, I was, a little concerned that why are these 2, $2,000 apart, and this one's about $18,000 less. Right. And it wasn't about fees. Fees were all generally across the board. And I must have went back 2 or 3 times. And you sure you understand the scope? Are you sure you're cool with the bid? We didn't have firm bids back then, but I was just really worried because they were so different. Yeah. No, we're fine. We're great. We really want to do the job. We're very excited. That we're very happy with our numbers. Awarded the job at maybe 11 o'clock in the morning. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I got an email from the rep with a list of overages for the job. That's not and nobody had talked to anybody in that so it's not 4 like something had changed. And I immediately picked the phone up. What is this? Right. Well, we took another look at the numbers and thought maybe we underbid a few areas. So There are some, we will need to incorporate some changes in the bid. I said, sorry.
Yeah.
I literally came back to you 2 or 3 times asking this very question.
Well, yeah, at that point, you can't go back to the client.
Well, and that's exactly what I told him. I said, I'm not going back to my account team. I'm not going back to my client. We have the number that you bid approved.
Yeah.
So you either pull out of the job now or do the shoot.
And
it's up to you. And they did the shoot.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling his photography fee was a bit less than what was written on that paper.
Yeah.
But to be that disingenuous, I mean, you award a job at 11 o'clock and at 3 o'clock, you have $8,500 in overages that are listed. And it's just unfathomable that you...
No, it's not professional.
That you think you can get away with something like that. I mean, sorry, art buyers weren't, we may have been born at night, but we weren't born last night, as the old saying is. So, I mean, there's just no place for that. I mean, that's why I just think you have to be as honest as you can up front. If you have a budget, I'm like, share it. Because you know what? You might be asking a photographer whose normal rate is $20,000 a day, but you have a budget that's not going to support that. And by the time they put their fee in and put their expenses in, they're going to be 30% too high. So, hey, we'd love to work with you. I know this is your normal range. I have, $75,000 to do this job.
Oh, I'd much rather you tell me that than have me go in and do my normal range.
Right. If I have a budget, I used to always pretty much tell you. It's when clients would say, love the concept, love the idea. Let's just see what it will cost. See what it costs. Then you're kind of at a disadvantage a little bit because, you just have to see what the numbers come. And
I was telling this story the other day that, I try really hard in my real life when I need to get estimates myself from a contractor or somebody's coming to wash the windows or whatever it is and they'll say, what's your budget? And I'll be like, oh, I don't know. I always feel so badly because I want to give them the budget, but it's that situation where it's just I actually just would like to redo this countertop, but I need to see how much it costs before I can value how much I really want to do this.
I have always instituted a triple bid system in my private life. Ever since becoming an art buyer, seeing the value of triple bids, I always tell everyone,
well, and there's a learning process.
You're the first person I'm talking to. I triple bid everything I do. And it kind of surprises them because they suddenly know what you're talking about. Yep. I want to see your bid. I want to see your insurance certificate. And people are blown away.
Or I'll get an estimate and I'll say, okay, I estimate for a living. So I'm just going to give you the heads up.
Right.
I'm really specific about line items and categories and clarity in your bid. So I am going to ask you questions about it. And then they think they don't know what I'm talking about. And then the bid comes and I'm red marking it and asking questions and moving things around and asking for some accountability here. Yep. And they're like, oh, okay, let me go back to the drawing board.
Any photographers or reps listening to this podcast will know that if I'm reviewing their bid, I am an absolute stickler for detail. I detest lump sums.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Me too.
If you're going to put a lump sum in for payroll service, I want to know what the number is and what the percentage is.
And how you got there.
If you're going to put in a lump sum for crew overtime, sorry, I want to know what every crew member's overtime rate is, how many hours you're attributing.
Absolutely.
Put it on a separate line item. People who bid in lump sums make me very nervous.
There's no excuse for that.
Because if it's a lump sum, you have no explanation how you came up with that number. Right. And the first thing an external auditor who comes in for our client and looks at these bids is going to say is, well, how did they come up with that number?
Right.
You have payroll service, $6,500. What's the percentage? Because your crew... If I use 10 or 20 or 30%, none of this works. The math doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
So the part of a bid that's most important is the math has to work. And lump sums stand the hair on the back of my neck because I just, how did you get to this number? You must have used some formula.
Yeah.
You can't just say, well, we took a look at, no, that doesn't work. Sorry, these are hard costs.
Yeah.
We're talking about day rates and overtime and time and a half times the rate. Times the hour. I mean, there's no excuse.
Yeah, there's no excuse anymore. And everybody has forms,
especially
and
on a
online forms, and we can all break it down.
I had one of our vendors send me their actual bid form blank, because I use it for my ballpark. That's how nice the form was. And boy, the form does everything for you. You don't have to add a thing. I haven't picked up my calculator in a year because it just And that's another thing. Please add your bids up and make sure the math is correct.
Oh my gosh.
You would be so surprised.
Really?
How many bids we get with simple math errors. Now, I'm not trying to be arrogant, but I can do math pretty quickly in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And if something looks off, I'm going to catch it really quickly. And then I usually go to the calculator. I'm like, maybe I'm wrong.
Right.
Yeah, blah, blah, blah. No, it's wrong. And it's a simple
Well, and I also find
math error.
sometimes agencies give me bid forms that I have to input my numbers in, and there's not always the right place to put stuff, so I have to kind of move things around a little bit. But I still do my bid form, and I'm still comparing the numbers and making sure they match, because in an Excel form, sometimes the formulas are off.
Well, that's what happens. I had one vendor who sent me a bid 3 or 4 times with the same error in it every time. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what are you doing? Yeah. Well, my Excel, now I understand. My Excel program wasn't adding it correctly. Well, 4th time around,
we need to figure this out.
Can we please, this is really getting long in the tooth. And I don't get frustrated. It's just simple things like that. I think, we're kind of beyond that.
Well,
little things, when you're a consultant and looking at 100 bids a day, you just wish people would do them correctly the first time, which is fine.
Saves a lot of time.
Everybody is going to get a little bit of feedback usually. And there are some bids that I find nothing wrong with. You know what? I tell you, this is a solid bid, and I think it's perfectly priced, and I wouldn't change a thing. And I do that often.
That's great.
If it's industry standard and it's fair to the photographer and to the client, I'm not going to unnecessarily neagle. Mm-hmm. I'm going to see if I can save 10% on this. What's the point?
What's the point?
This is a very fair number. Mm-hmm. It's solid. The client is getting great value. Photographer's doing very nicely for himself or herself. Yeah. I just don't see the purpose.
Well, thank you for that.
I do. And there's a lot of reps who do amazing bids. Mm-hmm. Production companies are doing a lot of bidding now for photographers because they're working with production companies on larger scale shoots. Mm-hmm. And but a lot of the bids just come in so solid, and very little, little things that you catch that, an outside auditor might catch. So you do make a comment about it. But boy, some bids are just so solid and done so thoughtfully.
Whenever a Leo bid comes in the door, we aim to make it solid, and
I can't think
we want to do a great job at it.
I can't think of a single Heather Elder bid that doesn't come in flawlessly.
Well, thank you for that.
No, I mean it. I mean, people just really do a good conscientious job. Well, the bigger shoots, the bigger budgets, the bigger jobs are the ones that create the most, commentary for me as a consultant. But, it's kind of hard to overreach on a one-day,
that's true,
shoot for grilled cheese sandwiches. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not right. It's not rocket science at that point. None of it's rocket science. It's just putting together a good package of needs to get the job done.
Before we leave, I just want to take a second here and thank all of our podcast listeners and supporters. We are on podcast number 38 with you, Michael, and this will be our last one before the new year. So I wanted to wish everyone a very happy new year, a happy holidays. I hope your end of year isn't crazy, and we'll see you back in January. Okay, thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. In an industry where the rules are always changing, it's helpful to hear from those on the front line. Heather Elder is the visionary behind notesfromarepsjournal.com. Visit her website for industry updates, stunning photography and video, and the artist behind the work.